Hello everyone, next review. So this is an interesting one. This is the one that I've been meaning to get round to for a little while now. Um, of all the reviews that I've done, this is the one I've been sort of most hesitant to review because it's the first short story collection that I've revisited in which whereby a lot of time has elapsed, I suppose. Um, all the other ones, I mean, I read Frankenstein in 2017 and I found that a lot easier to get into. I guess just because it's a straight single individual narrative, whereas there's a lot of stories in this George MacDonald's The Complete Fairy Tales. Also, it doesn't help that these stories are highly layered and symbolic and allegorical as well. There's a lot to cover here. However, this is not going to be so much of an in-depth review as it's more going to be a series of reminiscences, loose reminiscences. I'm not really going to go into the pros and cons of each story. In fact, I'm only going to pick out a couple here. Just as a little aside, does anyone else feel depressed when they can't remember stories? I only read this in summer of last year, 2020, and it's somewhat depressing because even though I enjoyed a lot of these stories at the time, I just cannot remember. I guess there's just so many books that one reads with a lot of analyses and imagery and plots and names and concepts. I guess you just have to live with it, I suppose. Just a little bit of a shame. But there are stories here that I really enjoyed. So, George MacDonald is a Scottish writer. Actually, that was one of the reasons I picked him up. Also, the cover as well. Just, I love these. I love this cover. A lot of people don't like Penguin Classics. They are sort of cheaply made, and the text is a little bit blurry on my edition. But I love this cover art. One of the things, really, it's people will always say that there's a common trope where people will say that idiots will say that fantasy is not art. Of course, we have Clark Ashton Smith and Dunsany, one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. We have George MacDonald, who was a prolific writer of symbolic and deeply serious and moralistic and layered stories, who is connected with C.S. Lewis and W.H. Auden and Tolkien. Tolkien is especially, actually. Tolkien wrote the Smith of Wootton Major, which was started as a tribute to the Golden Key, which is a George MacDonald story I'll talk about. But yeah, so that's just an aside. George MacDonald, very serious and very, very literary in a sense, even though these are fairy stories. And I guess you can. What I'm trying to say is that, in a roundabout way, this cover sort of highlights that and illustrates it, because when you think of fairy stories, you don't think of this sort of thing here. If you can see that. So let's get into it. There's a good introduction in this Penguin Classics edition, but more importantly, there's a really good essay by George MacDonald himself, The Fantastic Imagination, which has links to Tolkien's later on fairy stories. So the Fantastic Imagination is like a proto on fairy stories. It talks about George MacDonald's reasons for writing for children, for writing fantasy and working with the imagination. So I highly recommend reading that. It's only a couple of pages, but it's really good. So The Light Princess. It's an interesting one. Interestingly, it starts with a pun in a way. The Light Princess. So it's about an evil sorceress, I suppose, who curses a princess to literally not experience gravity. And so when that happens, she grows up, and the king and queen find out their daughter can't take anything seriously, and so as you can imagine, she is without weight. She floats up into the air. She's unrestricted. She doesn't take anything seriously. So you can see the connection there, hopefully. And they're always trying to find. One of the things that I found almost comical is that they're always trying to find ways to sort of keep her on the ground, as it were. And when people laugh, or when people cry, she laughs, and she doesn't quite understand the severity of certain situations. And I guess it's that thing of the sort of naivety of childhood and not understanding the weight of things, I suppose, and that's why she literally floats up into the air. And there's a symbolical element in the story of the sea. She loves the sea, and when she goes into the sea, she feels weighted for the first time, and I guess you can link that with tears as well. So again, all things in George MacDonald's stories are connected, and they're very based in imagery, and they all have something to say. So that was The Light Princess. I did enjoy that one. So hopefully you can see sort of stories that we're going to be dealing with here. They will eventually get more serious as well, almost religious and very divine and metaphysical as well. And in fact, there's actually, I'm just looking at a page, interestingly, part 6 is Try Metaphysics. So you can see this is not really a book for kids. I mean, you can probably just tell from the cover. I mean, it says it takes a piss almost in certain ways about certain people's views. It says Humdrum was a materialist and Kopykeck was a spiritualist. The former was slow and sententious, and the latter was quick and flighty. You can see it's more intellectual, and it's more. I mean, it says, "There's but one thing left," answered she. "Let us consult the College of Metaphysicians." I don't think this is for children, really. So that was The Light Princess. The next story is The Shadows that I really enjoyed. The Shadows imagery is incredible. It's about this comedy writer who falls ill and meets these shadows who almost have a society out in their Church of Shadows, as they call it, which I believe is set in Iceland, I think, or it's Norway. It must be Iceland, I think. In their society, really, these ephemeral shadows, I mean, it's interesting. They have this quality about them where they have to help people. A blurb, a description that I read recently, just to re-familiarise myself with the story, is that although their forms are black, their hearts are of the whitest. They have this need to help people and inspire them. So, for example, they'll actually frighten a drunkard they'll cast themselves in certain ways on the walls, and they'll frighten a drunkard out of drinking. They'll inspire a playwright to write again. They'll help a child to laugh, or I think it is. Yeah, it's just, that's as much as I can really remember of it. I can't remember the sort of the denouement and how the story ends, but really good. One of the things I've just remembered is there's a really nice part where the shadows in this Church of Shadows, they're meeting on this sort of lake of ice, and the character of this writer, the protagonist, is walking among them as they're all whispering to each other and telling each other what sort of thing they've done that day, who they've helped and whatnot. And they also bring up this concern of artificial light casting them away. So I found that really quite moving in a way, and that's the sort of thing I love, really. So that was The Shadows, really good as well. Okay, so I'm going to challenge myself here a little bit. The Golden Key. So I haven't even. The reason I say I'm going to challenge myself is that I haven't even gone into the detail of this story to revisit it, because I know that it is the most complicated story in this, and I wish that I could give you more detail. But to be perfectly transparent, I don't view these reviews as work. I sort of just enjoy talking about these books, and to go into this story would feel like work to me. I did enjoy the story at the time, of course, but to read it, I've got some writing to do, and I've got some other things to do as well. So this is a roundabout way of saying that this story, if you like layered and detailed and very almost divine and metaphysical work, you'll like The Golden Key. It's about a boy who learns of a golden key at the end of a rainbow. Sounds fairly straightforward, doesn't it? He eventually goes into this enchanted forest. Again, more fairy tale imagery and tropes and archetypes. However, it eventually broadens out, I suppose, to the point where there are talking fish. Again, Christian imagery. There is it says here, I'm just looking at the description just to make this a little bit more chatty, I suppose. So it says Tango meets with the winged Aranth, the air flower that used to be the fish who leads her to the mountain. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's not the best, it's just the thing that springs to mind. If you've seen the end of the film Annihilation, this short story almost gets to that level, or if not more. Actually, I'd say that Golden Key is a lot more serious and weighty than Annihilation, the film anyway. I haven't read the book by Jeff Vandermeer. But that's just, if you've seen that film, you'll know what I mean by that. It gets very cosmic, I suppose. And one of the things I was stunned by at the end of this book is this boy. So it's really about the journey between this boy and this young girl who reconnect with each other. They eventually go their separate ways. So where this story gets astonishing, and this just actually gave me goosebumps just thinking about it, because I love this sort of thing. There's the old man of the sea and the old man of the earth, and I love these. It's almost it's got that sort of, for me anyway. I'm just making associations here. This has the same weight and depth as the Silmarillion, and the sort of weighty, archaic language and imagery. There's the old man of the earth, who is this, who actually, I'll just say, the only thing I'll really give in terms of spoilers, it's not so much a spoiler because this is a very layered story, and probably even my description won't make sense here really, but the old man of the earth turns out to be the youngest of all, and it's just a child who exists in this underground, timeless realm where he's just sitting. And I'll go into, you'll see what I mean by the seriousness. I'm getting goosebumps right now actually thinking about it, because the language is incredible. So stick around if you want to see what I mean by that. The Golden Key, it's just incredible. The end as well becomes almost like rapture. It becomes almost, again, it's cosmic. They enter this almost this godly chamber where these gates are unlocked, and I can't really explain it more than that. And there's this sort of rainbow bridge, and it's very much this would come straight out of the King James Bible, really. Really astonishing. Again, I know that I'm not doing a good job at all of explaining this, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of the severity of these stories and how detailed and how important they are, really. So, the history of Photogen and Nycteris, a day and night merchant. German for fairy story, I believe, merchant. Or children's story, I think it is. This is a phenomenal short story. It's about a boy and a young girl who are trapped in a tower by this witch called Wathel, who is doing an experiment. This is almost Shelley-esque in a way. I remember, I'm actually casting my mind back to an analysis that I did of this story, where it's almost proto-scientific. There's an experiment so that the boy, Photogen, the boy of the sun, is kept always in the light, and Nycteris, the girl, is kept always in the day. She's never, so for example, she'll never be allowed to go out into the day and experience the sun. So she thinks that the brightest that the world can be is nighttime. And there's it's just incredible. It's all about the connection between the two, and it's almost like yin and yang, where you have to have the sun with the moon and the moon with the sun. It's incredible. Just in order to describe this story properly, I'm actually going to read just a quick paragraph from when I first finished this short story. It was in June 2020, sent to a friend. The last story was called The History of Photogen and Nycteris, probably the best one actually. I say that the stories got better near the end, almost more mythological and serious. It's about a boy and a girl who are kept in a castle by a cruel witch called Wathel. Golden-haired Photogen, the boy, isn't allowed to see the night, and Nycteris isn't allowed to see the sun. Photogen is brave in the morning, going out hunting for lions and buffalo with his mentor Fargu, whereas black-haired Nycteris is so sheltered that she thinks the night is as bright as the world can be, and loves her garden of night with moths and flowers. Just incredible. The two eventually meet, and they realise that they need to help each other to overcome each other's weaknesses. Really good examination of the interdependence of the sun and the moon. The two eventually learn to like the other's world better than their own. Yeah, just on that description, it's incredible. really neat and well constructed story. So there's a lot of stories here that I've not covered. There's a lot in this book. The Giant's Heart, Cross Purposes. There's a part from At the Back of the North Wind, which is another George MacDonald's individual work. So that covers Little Daylight, that covers Nanny's Dream and Diamond's Dream, the Carasoin, The Wise Woman. All those stories I haven't covered, so there's a lot in this book. All good. So let's get to the excerpts. It's from the Light Princess. "My dear child," said the king, "you must be aware by this time that you are not exactly like other people. Oh, you dear funny papa, I have got a nose and 2 eyes and all the rest, so have you, so has mamma." "Now be serious, my dear, for once," said the queen. "No, thank you, mamma, I had rather not." "Would you not like to be able to walk like other people?" said the king. "No, indeed, I should think not. You only crawl, you are such slow coaches, such slow coaches." "How do you feel, my child?" he resumed after a pause of discomfiture. "Quite well, thank you." "I mean, what do you feel like?" "Like nothing at all, that I know of. You must feel like something." "I feel like a princess with such a funny papa and such a dear pet of a queen mamma." "Now really," began the queen, but the princess interrupted her. "Oh yes," she added, "I remember. I have a curious feeling sometimes, as if I were the only person that had any sense in the whole world." It's actually an element of the story that I didn't pick up on, actually. Again, she feels like, because she takes things less seriously, I suppose for her she feels like that's the way to exist. She doesn't have, for me anyway, I think she doesn't have it. She's not weighted down by the sort of neuroticism and or the problems of an earthly existence, I suppose. It's a great little passage there. From the Shadows. At last they climbed up the bed of a little stream, and then, passing through a narrow rocky defile, came out suddenly upon the side of a mountain, overlooking a blue, frozen lake in the very heart of mighty hills. Overhead, the aurora borealis was shivering and flashing like a battle of 10,000 spears. Underneath, its beams passed faintly over the blue ice on the sides of the snow-clad mountains, whose top shot up like huge icicles all about, with here and there a star sparkling on the very tip of one. But as the northern lights in the sky above, so wavered and quivered and shot hither and thither the shadows on the surface of the lake below, now gathering groups, and now shivering asunder, now covering the whole surface of the lake, and anon condensed into one dark knot in the centre. Every here and there on the white mountains might be seen 2 or 3 shooting away towards the tops, to vanish beyond them, so that their number was gradually, though not visibly, diminishing. "Please, your majesty," said the shadows, "this is our church, the Church of Shadows." And so saying, the king's bodyguard set down the litter upon a rock, and plunged into the multitudes below. They soon returned, however, and bore the king down into the middle of the lake. All the shadows came crowding around him, respectfully but fearlessly, and sure never such a grotesque assembly revealed itself before to mortal eyes. The king had seen all kinds of gnomes, goblins, and kobolds at his coronation, but they were quite rectilinear figures compared with the insane lawlessness of form in which the shadows rejoiced, and the wildest gambols of the former were orderly dances of ceremony beside the apparently aimless and wilful contortions of figure and metamorphoses of shape in which the latter indulged. Just, again, all the connections and symbolism that can be made, but then the actual prose itself is just brilliant. So, the Golden Key. I'm going to read 2 sections from the very end, or near the end, and actually the very end. Just give you an idea of just how metaphysical and symbolic and serious that these passages, this short story is. So I guess be warned, there are some spoilers. In the next moment she descried, in a corner of the cave, a little naked child sitting on the moss. He was playing with balls of various colours and sizes, which he disposed in strange figures upon the floor beside him. And now Tangle felt that there was something in her knowledge which was not in her understanding, for she knew there must be an infinite meaning in the change in sequence and individual forms of the figures into which the child arranged the balls, as well as in the various harmonies of their colours, but what it all meant she could not tell. He went on busily, tirelessly playing his solitary game without looking up or seemingly to know that there was a stranger in his deep withdrawn cell. Diligently, as a lace-maker shifts her bobbins, he shifted and arranged his balls. Flashes of meaning would now pass from them to tangle, and now again all would be not merely obscure but utterly dark. She stood looking for a long time, for there was fascination in the sight, and the longer she looked the more an indescribable vague intelligence went on rousing itself in her mind. And it seemed to her like 7 hours, when all at once, the shape the balls took, she knew not why, reminded her of the valley of shadows, and she spoke. "Where is the old man of the fire?" she said. "Here I am," answered the child, rising and leaving his balls on the moss. "What can I do for you?" There was such an awfulness of absolute repose on the face of the child that Tangle stood dumb before him. He had no smile, but the love in his large grey eyes was deep as the centre, and with the repose there lay on his face a shimmer as of moonlight, where it seemed as if any moment it might break into such a ravishing smile as would cause the beholder to weep himself to death. But the smile never came, and the moonlight there lay unbroken, for the heart of the child was too deep for any smile to reach from it to his face. "Are you the oldest man of all?" Tangle at length, although filled with awe, ventured to ask. "Yes, I am. I am very, very old. I am able to help you, I know. I can help everybody." And the child drew near and looked up in her face so that she burst into tears. "Can you tell me the way to the country the shadows fall from?" she sobbed. "Yes, I know the way quite well. I go there myself sometimes, but you could not go my way. You are not old enough. I will show you how you can go." Yeah, that's just, I got goosebumps reading that actually. And that's just one element. At the end, especially, it's all like that. It feels incredible. There's actually, again, I almost enjoy reading these short stories without really remembering them, because I just looked on the other page and saw that, and reminded myself that there's a serpent in this desert as well. I love that sort of thing. There's just so much. I'm not quite sure the word to describe it. I guess weighty and archaic and serious and mythological depth to this language. The history of Photogen and Nycteris. So the context for this is that Nycteris, who was so sheltered that she even views outside as the other place. So not just the fact that she can't experience sunlight. She even views just being outside as the other place. So the context again is that she's escaped from the tower, the castle. From the cellar she got into a long passage into which the moon was shining, and came to a door. She managed to open it, and to her great joy found herself in the other place, not on the top of the wall, however, but in the garden she had longed to enter. Noiseless as a fluffy moth, she flitted away into the covert of the trees and shrubs, her bare feet welcomed by the softest of carpets, which by the very touch her feet knew to be alive, whence it came that it was so sweet and friendly to them. A soft little wind was out among the trees, running now here, now there, like a child that had got its will. She went dancing over the grass, looking behind her at her shadow as she went. At first she had taken it for a little black creature that made game of her, but when she perceived that it was only where she kept the moon away, and that every tree, however great and grand the creature, had also one of these strange attendants, she soon learned not to mind it, and by it became a source of as much amusement to her as to any kitten its tail. So this excerpt really shows just how, I love the dynamic here. So Nycteris thinks that she's experiencing the day, whereas she's only experiencing the night. She even calls it her day, and she even thinks that she can't even experience flowers being open. I love the way they investigate the surroundings, and once Photogen and Nycteris meet, they're constantly investigating, and they're confused about why for example, Photogen will be scared of the dark or can't see anything, whereas of course Nycteris can see everything in the dark, every blade of grass. Photogen looked close at the flowers, and thought he had seen something like them before, but could not make them out. As Nycteris had never seen an open daisy, so he had never seen a closed one. Thus, instinctively, Nycteris tried to turn him away from his fear, and the beautiful creature's strange, lovely talk helped not a little to make him forget it. "You call it dark," she said again, as if she could not get rid of the absurdity of the idea. "Why, I could count every blade of the green hair. I suppose it's what the books call grass, within 2 yards of me. And just look at the great lamp, it is brighter than usual today, and I can't think why you should be so frightened or call it dark." There she's talking about the moon. So it's incredible. She calls the moon the great lamp. She has not yet experienced the sun. Just imagine the sort of the power of that. Just to end here. For the sun was rushing up behind her. Photogen woke, lifted his head from her lap and sprang to his feet. His face was one radiant smile. His heart was full of daring, that of the hunter who will creep into the tiger's den. Nycteris gave a cry, covered her face with her hands and pressed her eyelids closed. Then blindly she stretched out her arms to Photogen, crying, "Oh, I am so frightened. What is this? It must be death. I don't wish to die yet. I love this room and the old lamp. I do not want the other place. This is terrible. I want to hide. I want to get into the sweet, soft, dark hands of all the other creatures. Ah, me. Ah, me." You can see just all the build up there, and then when she eventually does experience the sun, it's like entering another world. And the way he portrays that is just incredible. So, actually a little bit of a longer review than I thought it was going to be. Again, hopefully some of the enthusiasm came through there, even though, I mean, it's a testament, even though I could not remember some of these details and plot points and whatnot, I still enjoy the language very much, and I hope you do too if you read it. So that was George MacDonald's The Complete Fairy Tales. I'm not sure what I'll read next, or review next, rather. So again, thanks for watching. Cheers.